Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the meeting and welcome to those watching online at home. I have to remind members of the public that this meeting is being webcast live and everyone seated must use their microphones to be heard on the webcast. There is no scheduled fire alarm, so if one goes off, it's for real. There are two exits in this room, one through the double doors and the other behind me to the right. And I'll introduce everyone. I'm Stephen Watson, the chair. Next to me is Councillor Simon Marlow, vice chair. We have Neil Button, the interim development management team leader. James Mead, principal planning officer. To my right is Rachel Lee, legal advisor. We have over there Matthew Armstrong of Hertfordshire Highways. Here is Peter Mannings, the committee support officer. Over there is Martin Plummer, service manager, development management and enforcement. And I would like to introduce the council's executive member for planning and growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we do. Yes, apology from Councillor Vicky Burt and Councillor Moira Connolly as her substitute, and also apologies from Councillor Copley and Councillor Estop, but there's no substitutes for them.
Right. Now, may I ask that all participants remember to use your microphones when speaking? And now I'd like to mention a few weeks ago, Paul Burt sadly passed away. He was a linchpin for providing information for this meeting. And he was, I should also say, he was team leader for technical support. And I would ask us now to have 1 minute silence. Thank you, everybody. Now we move on to the minutes. We have before us the minutes for the meeting held on 12th of March 2025. Do we have any amendments or any comment? If there are no amendments, then can we have a proposer for the minutes? Councillor Stowe and a second, and Councillor Devonshire seconding. Can we have the vote too? Any against? Any abstentions? Those minutes have been agreed. So we move on to 5A of our agenda. That is the application 3/24/1953/FUL, erection of a battery energy storage system and associated infrastructure, including access, drainage, landscaping and other incidental works at land off Gaines Road, Stocking Pelham, SG9 0LR. And I would like to invite James Mead to present this application.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. This is a site location plan for the planning application, together with an aerial image of the site and the surrounding area. You can see from these images that the site is made up of an agricultural field, together with a private access track that runs east from Gins Road. The site measures approximately 12.5 hectares in area. The site is situated in a remote and rural location. Around 500 metres to the north of the site is the small settlement of East End, and the village of Stocking Pelham is further to the north. The site is designated as part of the rural area beyond the Greenbelt in the district plan. Next slide, please. This is an image facing northeast across the site from the southwestern corner of the field. In this image, you can see the agricultural character of the land. You can also see the electricity pylons on the eastern side of the site and the access track that runs along the southern part of the site. On the right-hand side of the image, you can also see the vegetation lining the southern site boundary. Next slide, please. This is an image facing northwest across the field from the southeastern corner of the site. Again, you can see the agricultural character of the land. You can also see how the site is lined with vegetation along the western boundary.
James, could you speak a bit closer into the microphone?
Next slide, please. This is an image facing southwest towards the site from a road to the north. The site is not highly visible in this image. However, you can see how the electricity pylons are prominent features within the landscape. This image illustrates how the area is defined by a contrast between agricultural land and the presence of high power lines and large-scale pylons associated with the Stocking Pelham substation. Next slide, please. This is an image facing east towards the field from the Hixham Farm complex, which is a group of buildings to the west. In this image, the field is behind the vegetation in the background. This image also shows a stretch of the access track which runs into the field. Next slide, please. This is an image of the western stretch of the access track, close to the junction of the track with Gins Road. Next slide, please. This is an image of the access from Gins Road onto the private track. Next slide, please. This application seeks planning permission for a battery energy storage system, which would include 2 substation compounds and a substation building on the eastern part of the site, 4 battery storage container areas and transformers on the western side of the site. These are shown in the blue colour on this plan on the screen. Each container area would include 40 battery units and 20 transformers. The scheme also includes office and storage buildings in the southwestern corner, water storage tanks on both sides of the site, and a fire water pond is also proposed. A drainage basin is included close to the western site boundary. The proposal also includes new internal roads, parking, landscaping, and fencing. The primary purpose of a battery energy storage system is to store excess energy, and in doing so, provide a reserve power supply to the local electricity grid. Through several appeal decisions, it has been established that battery energy storage systems should be viewed as low carbon and renewable energy infrastructure. Provision of such infrastructure attracts significant positive weight from both local and national policy. Next slide, please. The reason why this development has come forward in this location is because the site is within reasonably close proximity of the Stocking Pelham substation, which is around 900 metres to the north, as shown in this image. Due to this proximity, there is an opportunity to connect to the Stocking Pelham substation. Next slide, please. This is a section drawing of the development showing the southern elevation. On the right-hand side of this image, you can see the substation compounds, which include the substations and the associated masts. In the centre and on the left-hand side of this image, you can see the battery storage container areas. Next slide, please. This is a further section drawing of the development showing the eastern elevation. In this drawing, you can see the substation compounds and the battery container areas behind. Next slide, please. The application is supported by a landscape and visual impact assessment, which considers the impacts of the development in visual terms and in regard to landscape character. The committee report includes a detailed assessment of this landscape and visual impact assessment and concludes that there would be minor harm in landscape and visual terms. This image shows some of the key viewpoints that have been assessed in the landscape and visual impact assessment. Next slide, please. This is an image from the landscape and visual impact assessment, which shows an existing view from viewpoint 7, which is a country lane to the north. Next slide, please. This is a further image of viewpoint 7, 1 year after development. Because of the distance involved and the existence of screening from hedging and vegetation, the development is not highly perceivable in this view. Next slide, please. This is the third image of that view after 15 years after development, when landscaping has matured. Again, the development is not highly visible. Instead, the main change in this image is the increase in vegetation around the site as a result, as the new planting matures. Next slide, please. This is a further image from the landscape and visual impact assessment of viewpoint 9. This is a southwestern view from a country lane to the north of the site. Next slide, please. This is the second image of viewpoint 9, 1 year after the development. In this image, you can again see that development is not highly visible because of the distances involved and the existence of screening. Next slide, please. This is the third image of viewpoint 9, 15 years after the development. Again, very little visual change is perceivable in this view. Next slide, please. This is an existing view from viewpoint 10 in the landscape and visual impact assessment. This is a view westwards from a bridleway. Next slide, please. This is viewpoint 10, 1 year after development. In this image, you can see that development would be visible. However, it would nestle into landscape behind existing vegetation. It would also be viewed in the context of the existing electricity pylons. Next slide, please. This is the third image of viewpoint 10, 15 years after the development. In this image, the development has been further screened by new landscaping, which blocks gaps in existing hedgerows. Due to this landscaping and screening, you can see that the development is not highly visible in this viewpoint after 15 years. Next slide, please. Moving on to transport. Vehicle movements would be low during the operational phase of this proposed development. In terms of the construction phase, it is proposed for light goods vehicles to access the site from the south via the A120 and Albury Road, as shown in this image. Next slide, please. In terms of HGVs, it's proposed for them to access the site from the north via Burden, Stocking Pelham and Gins Road. Part of this route has already been used as a construction route for other similar developments in the area. Through the lifespan of this application, the applicant has discussed the HGV routes with the Highway Authority and has agreed to limit HGV visits to the site to 2 per day. Next slide, please. This is a further image of the northern route. This northern route is via country roads, and therefore the applicant has agreed to widen the road in several locations, as shown in this image, so to enable vehicles to pass each other. The orange dots in this image show where existing passing bays would be widened, whereas the green dots show where new passing bays would be provided. The Highway Authority has confirmed that they are content that these routes are safe and usable for construction vehicles. However, further specific details of the highway works would be secured via condition. Next slide, please. In terms of noise, the applicant has submitted a noise impact assessment, and the image on the screen is the noise contour plan from that document. The Environmental Health Officer has reviewed the noise impact assessment and considered the noise generated by the proposed battery energy storage system. This quantity concludes that with appropriate mitigation in place, such as acoustic barriers, which are shown in the turquoise colour in this image, the development would not result in material adverse impacts on nearby properties by virtue of noise generation. Next slide, please. Development incorporates several safety features, including a firewater pond, firewater storage tanks, battery management systems to identify any malfunctions, and multiple access points with a perimeter road layout. These safety features, together with numerous other measures, have been presented in an outline battery safety management plan, which has been subject to consultation with Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. This consultee raises no objection to the proposals. Therefore, the outline battery safety management plan is considered to be appropriate for planning application stage. Final battery safety management plan would be agreed with the Council and Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service via condition. This has been deemed an acceptable approach by several planning inspectors. Next slide, please. As previously noted in this presentation, this scheme would deliver low carbon and renewable technologies. Members should be aware that there are several other proposals in the area for low carbon and renewable infrastructure, as set out in the committee report. This image shows some of these other schemes. However, it is important to note this current application must be considered on its own merits. Next slide, please. Overall, officers consider that the significant benefits associated with the provision of low carbon and renewable technologies would outweigh any limited harm arising from the development. Therefore, it is officer's recommendation to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Could I also draw members' attention to the late reps and amendments sheet? Thank you.
Right, now we move on to the speakers, and I remind members that we ask questions of speakers now, so pay attention and make notes if you need, if anything arises. So can I call on Georgina Hoffer? You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, I'm Georgina. I'm speaking on behalf of Protect the Pelhams. The Landscape Character Assessment commissioned by the Council describes Furneaux Pelham as follows. The area has a quiet and empty feel with few roads or traffic, but is sparsely populated other than in the small village settlements of Furneaux Pelham and Little Hormead. It contains an unusually large number of historically interesting buildings. It has little built development and contains few detracting features. East End exemplifies these characteristics. It is an agricultural area accessed via a single track lane. It is therefore surprising that the applicant has determined that this is an ideal site for an industrial battery development. In his report, the officer discusses whether a development of a BESS at this rural location is appropriate. He concludes that the main locational requirement for a BESS is proximity to a connection point to the national grid. The officer then refers to an appeal relating to a battery in Battlesbridge near Chelmsford. Battlesbridge is near the A130 dual carriageway, the A132 is immediately north of the village, and the A1245 runs along the western side. As the officer notes, the site for the Battlesbridge BESS was derived following a site selection process based primarily on distance from the substation. No site selection exercise has been undertaken in the case of East End BESS. In fact, a BESS can be connected at any point on a high voltage network. The officer has also overlooked a more relevant appeal decision relating to a BESS that was proposed in Buxton. The committee should take careful note of the following comments of the planning inspector who refused this appeal. The site comprises agricultural land which had not been previously developed. There is no detailed analysis considering or discounting other sites in the vicinity which would support this rural site as the most appropriate option beyond the existence of a landowner agreement. There is no technical detail to demonstrate why a rural location close to this particular primary substation, rather than another location elsewhere on the network, would be a prerequisite for site selection. No evidence has been adduced that there is a particular need to boost the security and availability of generated electricity specifically in this area. The officer's report notes that there are 6 renewable schemes planned for the area adjacent to Stocking Pelham substation. The Council's landscape specialists have raised concerns regarding the cumulative impact of these developments. In their March response, they note that due to the incremental introduction of large-scale industrial development, the balance of open landscape and built development will change within a relatively small area, weakening the strength of landscape character. It is therefore felt that the effects would be at the upper end of the stated scale, i.e. moderate. In light of these concerns, it is extraordinary that the planning officer concludes that the East End BESS would preserve the existing character of the rural location.
Okay, thank you. Members, do you have any questions that you would like to put at this stage? Yes, sorry, to Georgina Hoffer.
Yeah, me.
You mentioned the renewable schemes. Have there been schemes in the past that have caused? I think this isn't the first of the schemes in the area. Is that right?
There's a Burden Hall solar farm. It's not been built yet, but it's been approved. Yeah, so that will have the cumulative impact of all the traffic for that.
Mhm.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you I think one of the issues is the um, harm to the environment,
Yes.
and if you're
And the
inexperienced,
use of the BMV.
yeah. Um, have other recent developments, have you noticed harm from them, or construction traffic causing
Well,
issues?
they're not being built yet. So when they are built, we're going to have the 4,700 HGVs that they were predicting for this one over 18 months, plus the Burden Hall, plus there's another one near the A120 as well. And who knows what else. Once this battery is approved, what else will come?
Okay, well,
It's the cumulative impact is, and then, you know, we've got this council commissioned report on the landscape saying that this is that we have to take into consideration the character of the land, you know, in planning decisions, and that it does hold weight. It can't be ignored.
right, well, thank you very much. I don't think we have any more questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to call on the people speaking for the application. First of all, is it
Together.
you're coming up together? That's right. So we have Andrew Urquhart for the Bishop Stortford Climate Group, and we have Ian York, the applicant's agent. And you're sharing 3 minutes. So
Both microphones if you want to.
Good evening, I'm Ian York, Planning Director at Litchfields. The applicant FRV PowerTech is an experienced global developer and operator of renewable energy projects, including 3 operating BESS projects in the UK. The country's grid is undergoing a vital transformation to tackle climate change and decarbonise by 2030. The National Energy System Operator has identified that one of the biggest problems Great Britain faces is the lack of storage to support intermittent renewable energy generators, such as wind and solar. Without storage, excess energy is wasted and the government pays developers to switch off generators, which cost £1 billion last year. This is expected to triple by 2030 in the absence of storage. When energy demand exceeds supply, polluting gas-fired power stations and expensive imported energy are needed. Renewable energy reduces reliance on fossil fuels and imported energy. The government's Clean Power 2030 Action Plan identifies 27 gigawatts of battery storage is needed by 2030. There is currently 5 gigawatts operational. This requires decisive action across the country. The proposed BESS would contribute positively towards the government and East Hert's net zero targets. There are no suitable brownfield sites near the Stocking Pelham substation. The application site is remote from the villages but close to the substation that has capacity and is very well screened by mature vegetation. It is currently used to grow grass for animal feed. All land surrounding Stocking Pelham substation is either grade 2 or 3, agricultural quality. The site is grade 3, the lowest quality available. DEFRA has identified that one of the most significant threats to food security is climate change. The design retains all trees and achieves a substantial biodiversity net gain of 80% in habitat units. We have responded to statutory consultee comments, including adding more planting, enhancing the local highway network, and agreeing to a maximum of 2 articulated construction vehicles per day. The proposal is entirely compliant with the National Fire Chief Council's requirements and has been developed in consultation with Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. There is strong policy support for the principal development and no objections from statutory consultees. Overall, the proposal accords with the development plan and there are no material considerations that would justify its refusal. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew Urquhart on behalf of the Bishop Stortford Climate Group. The group would like to support this application. UK has made significant progress in decarbonising the electricity system, but we're still reliant on gas generation to meet peak demand and as backup when renewable generation is low. Storage means that energy generated at times when it isn't needed can be used later, so less generating capacity is needed to meet evening peak demands. In the near term, batteries help to overcome grid constraints, reducing the cost and local planning impact of upgrades. And in the longer term, storage will reduce the land area needed for renewable generation. We urge the committee here to ensure that concerns from residents are resolved.
Mr. Urquhart. Okay, members, do we have any questions? Oh, wait, before we go on to that, I believe that we have one expert that could be available, but I propose. Do we have a proposal? I propose that we allow ourselves to ask an expert from the from the group to be asked. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I mean, he wouldn't get extra time to speak, but
No
the
extra
applicant
time. It's
basically
just
wants
if you
him to be
want
questioned.
to ask a technical questions. I propose that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Carter, and we will vote on that. And against and abstentions. That was everyone, I think. Well, I hope we have some questions now. Councillor Dunlop.
I've got a few questions. It says that it's LFP that you're using as your storage mechanism. Is that what you're settled on, or during your sort of development phase, if you discover another technology, would you want to move to that?
So currently all utility scale has moved to lithium iron phosphate from nickel, manganese, cobalt, because it's much inherently safer. If tomorrow there is a new technology which is again safer than this, then yes. But currently LFP is the best technology. It is safer and reliable, so suits the purpose.
One of the reason I ask is that one of the technologies is around compressed air storage, and uses old diesel generator turbines to do it, which would bring a completely different new noise profile to the site. So, you know, have you definitely settled on a battery as opposed to mechanical form of storage?
So this is a short duration storage project. Lithium, that much I can confidently say that lithium is the technology we'll use. Lithium iron phosphate is currently the technology. Compressed air storage are typically longer duration storage systems, so it's not suited for the project that we are currently
No, I
proposing.
understand. Yeah. Can I ask another one?
Sure.
I noticed quite a large patch of green space in this isn't a technical question really, it's more, there's a large patch of green that's not actually being used within the red line. Have you considered using that for food production as opposed to just wilding it?
I think we were primarily using it for biodiversity enhancement, and also we wanted to set it back from the tree line to help with positioning it in the centre of the site. That would help in terms of views to the site, and it meant that we could retain all the boundary landscaping as well. So this is one part of a larger farmstead, which the farmer is keen to help with sort of, I suppose, viability with the rest of the farm. So it seems to suit their needs, and like I say, we're using it to enhance the ecology and biodiversity that we can deliver on the site, which is up around about 80% improvement.
The reason I ask is that every time we release some agricultural land, I work out the number of loaves of bread that it equates to. So I'm now up to 350,000 loaves of bread that will not be produced in the UK anymore over the 3 last applications. So it's growing all the time, and I think it's worthwhile us taking this seriously.
All right,
just letting it fly.
All right, Councillor Carter, you've got.
Thank you. Yes. So I just wanted to ask a sort of specific question about this, about battery storage, whether it's storage for local energy, whether it has any kind of local focus, or whether it is just for the grid as a whole, if you understand what I mean. So I wonder if you could answer that.
So the battery project is connecting to Stocking Pelham substation. Stocking Pelham substation is defined as an MITS, Major Infrastructure Transmission Substation. So it is one of the major substations in all of UK. There are about 50 or so of them. They then distribute to all the local areas, but also are used as transmission systems from, from Scotland down to south. So it is both. So it would help balance the local energy imbalances, but would also be helping the transmission system. So we are connecting to the transmission, but that substation itself is supplying to the local areas, but also is part of the larger transmission system.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't allow you to. No, I'm sorry. Councillor Hill.
Sorry, just for clarification on your last point, because I don't think that question answered me.
Councillor Hill,
Sorry.
who are you asking the question of?
To the technical expert. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. So this battery storage is connected to the substation, and it takes energy from that substation, from the grid, and stores it. So how do we know that's renewable energy it's storing? Is there some algorithm that tells it when it's storing renewable energy and not just gas generated energy? So I'm just curious how it works.
Sure. See, electricity is electrons. There is no difference in electrons, whether it is coming from gas or coming from battery. But, it's like water, whether you have mineral water or you have a tap water, it's H2O. So the electrons are same, but the quality of water is very different depending on where it is coming from. The quality of electrons that are generated from renewables is intermittent. So the voltage varies quite a bit. And so you need batteries to balance it. If it was coming all from gas, you won't need batteries. So there was no requirement of batteries when 100% of our system was supplied by coal or gas. It is only now that we have put solar and wind onto the system that we need to control that intermittency. So as that intermittency grows, we will need more and more battery storage. So that's what is, if 100% of the grid was being supplied by gas, there is no requirement of a battery. So I guess that explains my point that if battery is storing something, that means there is variation in the grid at that time.
Okay, Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the objections within our report today are to do with danger and fire. So can you reassure this committee that this is not a dangerous process, that that you're building here, that there's no danger in it, there's no chance of any fire?
Yeah, I think a lot has happened in battery technology over the years. There's been one fire in UK, which was a system built in, I think, 2018-19. The battery standards today follow NFPA 855, which was first published in 2020. So, like any technology, first the technology adoption happens and then the standards are set. So it was published in 2020, then it was revised in 2023. Most of the fires you will see are for systems which were prior to those standards when they were set. NFPA 855 is a very stringent standard. It defines what is the minimum requirement. So you have to exceed those requirements, and all batteries have to certify that they meet those requirements. So there are guidance documents like NFCC and all of that. But NFCC also points that you have to meet these standards. And today, if you look at, and there is a EPRI website which tracks all the battery fires and incidents. If you look at, and even just UK, it's been 6 million hours of operation. There has been one fire, which equates to about 3 incidents in 10 million hours of operation. As per the guidelines and established standards for safety, 1 in a million is considered safe. I mean, even your car doesn't meet those standards. I mean, most of the houses in UK won't meet those standards. So the batteries today are multiple times more than the standards which have been set for safety.
Councillor Marlowe.
Yes, I've got 2 questions. First is, how does the electricity get imported into the grid and from the grid? Is there a wire going from the transformers up to the cables that we see alongside of the field?
Yes, there would be a cable which will be taken underground.
Right.
From our site to the substation. And that cable is two-way. So it would import from the substation and it would export to the substation as well.
So it's an underground cable?
Yes.
That goes up there. Okay, fine. And the second is, and this is a bit of my schoolboy health and safety coming in, there's water ponds for dealing with fires, and I'm kind of a bit perplexed about that because I was told that fire, electricity and water don't mix. So what's the plan? What's the chemistry that's being employed?
So water is not used for the to be put on the fires. That's now an established practice to handle best fires. You don't put water, you let it burn out. The water is used to cool the surrounding enclosures, so keep their temperature low. So that's why there is a certain defined volume of the water that you need to just cool the adjacent enclosures.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
So I've got one more question. I do understand that you can't put out chemical fires with water, but they burn very intensely and do give off noxious gases. So how would you protect local properties from that if you're not actually putting out, you're just letting them burn out?
So there is a potential of gases, but the way these enclosures are now designed, it's on module basis and rack basis. So if you monitor on a cell level basis. If one cell causes a thermal runaway, you shut down the whole system. And so at most, maybe one rack will burn, and it has happened in past also. So there would be some gases, but because of the distance, they do not cause any harm. Recently also, there was a fire, I think in California and Moss Landing, and they tested with sensors all around, and the air quality there was no change in air quality.
Well, thank you. Do we have any other final questions? Then I'll let you go. Thank you very much for your time.
Debate.
Hmm?
Debate 3. Debate.
Do we not have parish?
Yes.
Now we have a parish councillor, Colin Berthold, on behalf of Furno Pelham and Stocking Pelham Parish Council. And you have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, councillors and members of the committee. Neither the applicant nor the planning inspector have properly considered the traffic risks of this development. There are issues both within Hertfordshire and Essex that mean you should reject the application or delay your approval. In Hertfordshire, the biggest issue is the Pelham Preschool in Stocking Pelham, which has 30 children being delivered and picked up every school day. During pick-up and drop-off times, parents and children are in the road because the road is narrow and parents must park in the road. Children arrive and depart between 8:15 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. with a gap between 9:45 and 12:10. While the applicant and the report recognise the dangers of passing the school during pick-up and drop-off, they ignore the actual drop-off and pick-up times. The applicant and planning officer have agreed times that will give LGVs and HGVs a 2.5 hours overlap with drop-off and pick-up times, endangering the lives of children and their carers. In addition, during summer months, the school walks the children down the road to the recreation ground. The school has already done this twice in the spring this year. These walks can happen at any time in the school day. 30 children on a road and 20 to 50 additional LGV and HGV movements per day don't mix very well. The applicant and planning report claim that the route in Essex has been approved for similar purposes. This is not the case. The volume for this new development, one of the largest BESS installations in the country, is 10 times higher than that for the Pelham BESS, built nearly 10 years ago, and simply not comparable to the recently permissioned Burden Solar Farm. Half the circular lorry movements will pass through Manudon every day at times that are unspecified. Manudon School is a much busier school than Pelham Preschool, but with a similar narrow road. I should add, in case you don't know, Manudon is in Essex. To avoid the Pelham Preschool drop-off and pick-up, construction traffic will presumably pass through Mannion during peak pick-up and drop-off times. There are other schools on the route in Clavering and Newport and numerous single-track roads that require additional passing paces given this volume of additional traffic. You have a duty to consider the health and safety, not just of the Hertfordshire community, but also of our neighbours. I urge you to request a full report from Essex Highways, who have not commented on this application, before determining the application, or turn it down given the known risks to children in Hertfordshire. One thing I've learned in business, it is better to delay than to do a bad deal. If you share any of our concerns, it is better to delay your decision today or reject it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just wondering about the figures for the numbers of HGVs and what that's based on.
It's actually very hard to get an accurate number. I don't know how many HGVs or even light vehicles there are going to be going around because there isn't a number. There's sort of there's peaks and there's averages, but trying to work out what the actual number is. But there are thousands if you work out the average time times the time in which they take. So I say 20 to 50 because it's pretty difficult to work it out. The planning officer talked about the articulated lorries. There'll be apparently a limit of 2 each way a day, but those are the very, very largest lorries. There are other HGVs and the lighter vehicles throughout the day. So I find it very difficult to actually work out precisely the number. It's somewhere between 20 and 40 a day.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, I think we don't have any more questions for you. Thank you for your time. And finally, we have District Ward Councillor Jeffrey Williamson, who has 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members and officers. You've heard already a number of arguments put forward by the local community why this application for a battery energy storage system in the proposed location is not acceptable. I also would like to express serious concerns regarding this proposal, and I also put the case that the application should be refused for several critical reasons. I am not, of course, arguing against all such developments, and we need this kind of infrastructure if we are to meet the government's net zero targets. However, it is foolhardy to allow this kind of development so near to residential buildings. I don't know if a safe distance has been defined, and this is one of the issues, but living only 500 metres or less from unstable infrastructure that can blow up, become a conflagration lasting days, and emit poisonous gases is not enough. And from the slide you saw earlier showing the aerial photograph of the site, you can see how close the houses are. The planning report suggests that developments of this type can be profitable placed at more than 3 kilometres distant from the grid connection point, but this site is under 1 kilometre away from the Pelham substation, which brings it dangerously close contact with nearby homes. The approval of this proposal would contravene paragraph 102 of the NPPF, which emphasises public safety such as malicious threats and hazards. Industrial scale batteries are inherently dangerous, and documented evidence highlights the risks of BESS fires, which can cause explosions, release toxic gases, and result in chemical spills. Since 2011, nearly 100 BESS fires have been reported, including the well-known incident at Orsted and Liverpool in 2022, which resulted in a significant blast and required 59 hours of firefighting to bring it under control. The gases released can travel miles and are a hazard to human health and life. In considering this application, I ask you to prioritise the safety of the community and note the applicant has failed to provide essential information required by the National Fire Chiefs Council's guidance. The absence of details about the batteries to be installed and the lack of confirmation from Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue regarding the mitigation of fire and risks of explosion are alarming. At only 1.5 metres apart, the batteries are more tightly packed than the recommended 6 metres. As a district council, we have a legal duty to avoid creating or permitting hazardous developments, as established by the Court of Appeal's judgment in the 2021 case of Kane versus New Forest District Council, and we open ourselves to similar litigation if we neglect this duty. Therefore, the application should be scrutinised for its compliance with reasonable health and safety standards. The Research Institute of Sweden published a report in 2023 providing guidelines for fire protection in BESS, listing numerous potential causes and consequences of BESS failures. These include manufacturing errors, environmental damage, and electrical faults, leading to severe outcomes like thermal runaway, explosions, and the release of toxic gases. Recent fires in the UK further underline these risks. For example, only last week, a battery plant at West Byhill in North Ayrshire exploded for the second time, causing significant concern and highlighting the potential dangers of such installations. The Planning Inspectorate's conclusions in February 2024, following an appeal by Enso Green Holdings, emphasised the importance of sufficient information on health and safety measures. This refusal of permission due to insufficient safety assurances sets a precedent that should be considered with the current application. The planning inspector noted in this case that the risks from fire and heat and a fire would also likely to release a range of toxic fumes. My residents are already asking me whether there be an early warning system installed, how the evacuation would work, and even if the district council will provide gas masks. Is this the kind of environment we want our residents to be living in? Therefore, in coming to review this evening, I would ask you to consider whether you have all the necessary information to make an informed decision. The potential for negligence and subsequent liability for harm to persons or property is a serious consideration. We should prioritise best applications and are sufficient distance away from residential buildings, not one just a little more than a quarter of a mile away. We all have a duty to protect public safety and adhere to our legal obligations. So I urge you to evaluate these risks thoroughly, prioritise the safety and well-being of our community, and reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, members? Councillor Devonshire.
Sorry, it's not a question, Chair, but could we have the map up on the screen to see what the proximity of this BESS is to the houses?
Do we? Yeah, while we're doing that, does anyone have any questions for the local district councillor? Nope. Well, thank you for your time.
Chair, may I raise a point of order, please?
Yes.
The applicants were given the opportunity to bring along an expert so members could put any particular questions they had. Those who are against the application were not given such an opportunity. I don't believe that's fair.
If you'd asked, we would have considered it, and we are quite willing to. If we've in the past allowed extra speakers, etc. We're quite prepared to be flexible if it's helpful to this debate. So if you had asked, and I think it was helpful for members because it's such a technical thing, and equally if you'd had an expert.
Through you, Chair. I mean, further to that, I mean, in the past, the committee has deviated from its speaking scheme on many occasions when asked to do so by applicants and objectors. So the committee has done it before when asked and is quite willing to do so when they're asked in advance of the meeting. So yes, you're right.
Does that help?
Well, I think to say that we should have asked when you don't even know the opportunity's there is not really quite an answer, but I'm happy to leave the point there. Thank you very much indeed.
All right, members. Now, debate is open. Do we want to start with principle of development? The NPPF, anything like that, or who wants to kick me off? Councillor Stowe.
Well, what I'd like to know, on the report, the officers mentioned two sites, one dated 21 and one 2022, that are still being considered. And I wonder why this site has come forward and we're still considering two that have been there for some while. Could they answer that, please?
I mean, the other applications that are being considered in their individual merits are still going through an assessment process, and so neither of those applications are in a position yet where officers have concluded their assessment, but through the process of dealing with the current Gins Road application, the responses that have been received by the applicant and their team have satisfied the concerns raised from the consultees, satisfied concerns that have been raised by officers throughout the course of this application, transport issues that have been raised that have been addressed with the county, issues relating to landscape and visual impact assessment that have been addressed through the revisions to the landscaping scheme, and issues relating to flood risk and drainage. All of the sort of technical areas have been addressed to our satisfaction to enable us to determine or to make a recommendation for this application on the basis of the merits of this scheme. But those other applications that Councillor Stowe refers to, we're not yet ready to determine those applications, and so when they come forward, if they come forward to the committee for a recommendation, the dealing with that application or those applications with this application, if this application is approved, will form a factor for consideration at those applications. But this application simply is the first application that's ready with a positive recommendation.
Councillor Stowe.
The concern's been expressed about the selection of a site, and that's why I've raised that point, because these date back to 2021, 2022, and it could look like the selection for a site has not been as thorough as it should have been.
The planning policy requirements don't necessitate the need for a sequential type of assessment. They also don't require an assessment of need, and so those elements of policy don't require that sort of sequential assessment. I think it's a sort of commercial decision that the operators make in terms of where they locate, and clearly this operator has looked at the area, identified the substation and its proximity, and looked at the location in terms of landscape quality, looked at access, all those issues, and has selected it on that basis. But that there isn't a planning policy test such as you would have for, let's say, a retail impact assessment or a flood sequential style assessment for those types of sites. So there's no requirement in policy terms.
So members, this is we have some policy to weigh up. We've got the National Planning Policy Framework, and I take it you've read the report where it identifies that this is a renewable energy infrastructure, which we could go down that leg of debate. But we also have Matthew Armstrong here from Highways, and I think it's probably worth spending some time looking at the construction traffic management plan, those sort of things, because it's quite, and I see Councillor Hill.
Yeah, so one of the speakers was talking about the volume of HGVs, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about and misunderstanding. So what is the definition of an HGV?
Chair, I'm happy to answer that. Would a 1 minute overview of the Highways history be useful first, and then answer that? I'm happy to go straight into answering that. Which
that would be very helpful, I think.
An overview.
Would that be?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no. Thank you for the comments. I've heard the representations. Just wanted to clarify. Obviously, I'm here representing Hertfordshire Highways. So quite a large part of the construction route is within Essex. So I'm here to answer questions on the Hertfordshire section, which the HGV route is it's about 1.5 miles within Hertfordshire. I say that the majority is within Essex. So just wanted to make that clear at the start. We initially shared some of the concerns that I know have been raised by various people. We recommended refusal. It was back early on when the plan application was first submitted, November 2024, on insufficient information. We felt it was largely a desktop assessment, and so we made it clear to the applicant that they needed to, go out on site, look at the whole route in detail, take measurements on site and cross-reference that with Ordnance Survey mapping, because sometimes that's not entirely accurate. Pictures, written descriptions, traffic surveys, consideration of all highway users, that kind of thing. And so the applicant did that. That resulted in several back and forth construction traffic management plan versions. And we're now at a point where the latest construction traffic management plan overcomes those initial concerns. So we withdrew our objection on that basis. In terms of HGVs, there are different definitions depending on different organisations, the Department for Transport, so on and so forth. Usually it's anything 7.5 tonnes or above. So, for example, a supermarket delivery van is just that, a van. But yeah, it'd be anything that it's defined by weight primarily. But there was reference made to articulated lorries, which is the very largest lorries. We've been very clear that that must be capped at a maximum of 2 per day. The timing for deliveries of movements of articulated lorries is again will be 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. All other HGVs, so non-articulated lorries, it will be 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Does that help?
Can I just follow up on that? Because we've got that condition for 2 articulated lorries. Is that absolutely tied down, that definition?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Stowe.
And just to follow on again, I mean, we say about these 2 articulated lorries in a day, and then all other heavy goods vehicle movements be up to peak times. But how do you police that? Do you just trust the contractor to keep to it, or does somebody go out and check, or do we have a ticketing system, or what?
There's probably one more for the planning team here. It will all be within the construction traffic management plan, which is conditioned, planning condition. The enforcing authority will be the local planning authority.
Yeah, we can require records as well to be kept, and so that would signing in and signing out, and so there is a way to record that activity. And the other thing, just to follow on to one of the points that a colleague was raising there, was in terms of Essex County Council and Oxford District Council were consulted on the application, and neither council provided any written representations to the consultation. So the lack of a consultation response from Essex and from Oxford has resulted in, say, Hertfordshire taking a sort of lead in looking into the Hertfordshire elements of it.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to you saying about the company keeping records and you enforcing that, I'm sorry, you know, in Strawberry we've had practical experience of construction management plans not being applied and not being kept to, and having photographs taken and sent to your officers. What enforcement will you put in place? Because, you know, they will not keep to it, because if they need to have 3 deliveries that day, they will go ahead and have 3 deliveries.
I think the proportionality of the enforcement breach would have to be considered when that was known, and it's very difficult to try and speculate what kind of impacts could occur and what action we would take in those instances. Obviously, it could result in probably a fine if there was some nuisance that was caused as a result of the extra movements. That wouldn't necessarily be a planning breach, but there are other environmental regimes that would get involved. But it's very difficult for me to sort of comment accurately without, you know, any real breach. So, but I think it is an important point that you have raised, and you know, it's not going to be the only scheme which has construction traffic in the district over the coming years.
Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding enforcement, and I think it was a comment made by one of the parish councils that they highlighted that the applicant has no presence in the UK in regards to no employees, no assets or no debt, net debt. How would the council in that case enforce any conditions or any violation of conditions basically with the parent company not being based in the UK, and would this have any impact? Thank you.
Can we come back to an answer for that? I think it's worth thinking about that and being able to come back with a more sort of full answer. Initially, I think the decision to enforce won't be taken lightly, and so I think the scale of the breach is an issue that I've already identified and would be considered in terms of how it would be enforced. I think that's something that we would need to give real consideration to, but we'll come back to you with a fuller answer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Holt. It's chair, not chairman. Thank you. Anything else on transport, construction phase? We had some issues. The other big issue I would say would be fire safety. Does anyone want to bring up? Councillor Holt.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding, and I know that obviously fire safety was a significant concern for many of the residents. Just two questions. One was that I see that the Herts Fire Service has not put any objection, but they did put in a recommendation for turning circles within the site. Just to have some clarifications if these are included in the plan. I didn't notice any, so that would be good. And also regarding the NFCC, which is the National Fire Chiefs Council, recommends that there is a 6 metre spacing between battery units, and I noticed this scheme has a distance of its narrowest point of just 1.5 metres. Is this deviation from national fire guidance normal? Thank you.
I'll attempt to answer the first question, the second question first, sorry, Councillor. In terms of the 6 metre distance, it is a recommendation, and so and that relates to sort of technology when in those earlier battery storage systems, and so as technology has advanced, the 6 metre distance between batteries is now considered to be flexible and can be applied flexibly. In this case, the distance is actually 3.5 metres because it's 1.5 metres from the skids that are separated the two battery units. So the late rep sheet confirms that that was a correction. So the distance in this case is 3.5 metres between battery storage units. So that's all been sort of confirmed. In terms of the way that the batteries burn, and it's already been touched on by the technical expert, as technology has improved, the distance between the two battery units and the way that they would sort of overheat, the technology encases the fires, it encloses the overheating rather than being sort of close. And so because the technology and the surface material that's enclosing them is containing the overheating within them, the distance to each other isn't so important, and so that allows the guidance to be applied flexibly, and that's what we've been advised. And as you pointed out, in this case the NFCC have raised no objection, and so are certainly at the moment we're on the understanding that they are in agreement with the decision that's been made. In terms of the turning circle, the application's been subject to consultation prior to submission to the local planning authority, and so the fire service were part of that pre-application consultation, and in response to that, the site's been designed to obviate the need for turning circles within the site, and it is possible to turn around the site. There are 3 access points into the compounds, and so the accessibility of the site is fully established in line with the criteria that's been advised.
Thank you.
Councillor Dunlop.
My question's regarding the fire water pond. There's a fire water pond and there's fire tanks. Am I right to presume that the fire water pond then tops up the tanks? And if that presumption is correct, what happens whenever we get a time of drought? Does the pond just go dry and the tanks never get topped up?
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on this, and so that's a question that the experts would.
My understanding was that there were 2 large tanks, and actually the pond is for to catch any runoff, because you're going to have an awful lot, isn't it? Attenuation?
The tanks are required to cool
the
casements in event of that fire, but I think the storage of the water within the pond, it would be put to different purposes. I can't quite recall what the technical reason was, but it hasn't. That sort of was brought in further to response consultation with the local fire service, and so the scheme's been designed to try and overcome issues of bringing water onto the site for the purposes that it's intended for.
Yeah, I didn't see the pond being addressed as a source of water in the report. I thought it mentioned that water would run off, and then if it was tested and found to be safe, it would be allowed to continue on. Otherwise, it would be not. So I assume there'd be some storage for runoff, and I thought that pond might have been it. But Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had a question about the, and I apologise if I've missed it, but the kind of first line of fire response, is that automatic? Is that, how would that work? Is there other, one of the residents has talked about alarms as well. So what would be, obviously fire engines are quite a long way away, fire stations are quite a long way away. So what's the first reaction in case of a fire, apart from the sort of shutting down of the individual batteries?
That was a question for one of the expert, wasn't it?
It's an issue that gets picked up through the fire safety plan, building operations plan. The final plan that is a condition will be consulted with the fire service, and issues that you've raised, I think, will certainly be considered in that through that process. And so that's a final management plan that is conditioned, and there is consultation, a requirement for consultation with the fire service before that condition can be discharged.
Thank you for that. And just to quickly come back, so these questions that were raised about having perhaps an alarm if there was a severe fire, could that be taken on board in that plan?
I mean, there is a battery management system which monitors conditions within storage units, I understand. And so that if there was a warning of overheating, then there would be a response, and it could kick in at that sort of stage, so to an alarm.
I think my point was more for residents rather than the people who are operating it.
Like I say, it's a very detailed technical point that the fire service will have their own guidance on, and that guidance, which is falling through into the National Fire Chief's guidance, would have to be adhered to in terms of a building operations plan. So I think that could be dealt with at that condition stage.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. My question is going on from that point, really, that I would hope within that fire plan there is some sort of fire suppression system. And also, before you ever get to that, are there monitoring systems in there that if they notice there's a fault somewhere, they shut stuff down before it ever gets to that point? Thank you.
Councillor Stowe.
Thank you. I just wondered, there's a track leading up to this site, isn't it? And is there a requirement? I didn't find it in the papers at all about making it up to a proper road and proper entrance to the site. So it's not, like you'd normally do, a nice big curve going around to protect it. I think that's quite important because it'd be a mud trap and the roads around the village would be just like a mud bath.
Yeah, I don't know if that's one for highways.
The road leading from the public highway to the site is a private road, but there is a public footpath, right-of-way footpath, running over part of it. From memory, in my site visits, I think it's kind of semi-made up, kind of an MOT type 1 hardcore material. So generally, that's quite hard wearing for HGVs. For memory, it wasn't outright kind of mud, but our interest in that would be making sure that obviously no dirt or mud or debris is brought out onto the public highway itself, and that's within the construction traffic management plan. But also, with it being a public right-of-way footpath, our right-of-way team have asked for some measures along that route. Signage. There's a couple of, well, there we see it. Yeah. No, it's actually, yeah, it's not too badly surfaced, is it? And there are a couple of passing places already on it, and the applicant's proposing another passing place closer to where it joins the public highway. So yeah, it's in terms of our remit of the public highway and right-of-way users, we're satisfied it's appropriate.
Councillor I don't know who was first there. Councillor Dunlop and then councillors.
Going first, is it? Sorry. I just wanted to know if officers could get a condition in there that, being it is a public right of way, to maintain the surface so that people can walk on it. Because there's somebody, I mean, a big lorry carrying a big weight is going to make holes in the road without any question. It's only MOT type 2, and it might be scalpings. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks like a grey colour, could be scalpings, and that needs to be protected in the surface.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So for the public highway, we've asked for a before and after survey, photographic survey, written description before the development and after, and I think there'd be an expectation that would be monitored as well throughout. So in the full construction traffic management plan, which the applicant would need to provide by condition, we could include that, and we can extend it to the right of way as well to make sure that that's covered.
Yeah, could we have that, a note taken of that, and would that be taken forward to the final construction management plan? Now, Councillor Dunlop.
It's not to do with highways or fires, but I noticed that this application is for a period of 40 years, and then it gets returned to agricultural land. Is that a closed thing, or what happens if they get to the end of the 40 years? Because I imagine we'll still need the storage. What happens once we get to the end of the 40 years and they still want to maintain it? Do they have to apply for an extension, or what's the mechanism for the?
Thank you. Condition number 27 is a requirement for the decommissioning, and this is 18 months before the end of the condition states that the 18 months before the end of the 40-year period taken from the first energisation date submitted under previous condition, a scheme of restoration shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and the details shall include retention of any approved boundary treatments, planting, restoration scheme to be used at the end of the operational lifespan of the development, and then a written scheme of restoration for returning the site to a pasture field on the cessation of the energy storage at the site. The approved scheme of restoration shall be implemented and completed within 12 months at the end of the 40-year period. And so those conditions are quite usual in terms of restoring a former use or former field to use, so solar farms, temporary uses.
So it would be a separate application then if they wanted to extend?
Sorry, it'd be the discharge of that planning condition.
Yeah, I see.
They need a new planning application if they want to extend it past the 40 years. So they'd need to reapply for that.
That's fine to know. Thank you.
Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. It was mentioned that they would need to run a cable from the site up to the substation at Stocking Pelham, which is about, I think, 1 kilometre north. I think on one of your previous slides, it was much more obvious where with the substation. And it actually looks like it needs to go across a highway. Does that, now I know that's not part of this application, but will that need a separate planning application to run this the cable?
It would be an underground cable, wouldn't it? So it would involve some development.
I don't think it would require planning permission, but there likely is going to be another regime where that will be considered. And obviously, if there's soil to be removed, there would be considerations at that time, but not. My understanding is there wouldn't be a planning application for it. This application considers development within the red line, which has been sort of set out in the presentation.
But surely this application depends on that cable being able to run through to the substation. Is there, if there was a reason why that cable could not be run through to the substation, therefore this application could not go ahead? What happens then?
Well, there is a condition that it has to be functional.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not a requirement of planning permission for one thing, and so that isn't within the realm of this application to control.
Councillor Connolly.
Going back to the decommissioning, I thought I saw somewhere a requirement for a bond, and I took it that.
Members, can everyone hear? Councillor, you speak closer to the mic, please.
Going back to the decommissioning, I thought I saw somewhere a requirement for a bond, and I took that to be for decommissioning. Can't find it now. But it was very light on detail. So can you confirm if that bond is for the decommissioning? For example, if the company has gone bust or we can't find it because they're overseas, how is that registered or established for the future decommissioning?
The bond isn't secured under the planning permission. The bond would be through a separate commercial deal, I would imagine, and therefore this planning application does not set out a financial requirement for a bond in this instance.
But it is in condition 21.
Sorry, the bond itself would be a commercial agreement, but the condition is. Just read out the condition so we're clear. Prior to the first energisation of the development, a bond shall be placed to fund decommissioning on the project as required by condition, in order to safeguard the rural character of the site. I understand this is more related to sort of the landscape and the quality of the tree planting that's going on, but the bond, it would be a separate financial agreement, but this just requires them to do the bond in the first case. It doesn't. We don't require approval of a bond to be approved by the local authority because we don't get involved in that.
Right, members. We've gone silent, so suddenly 2 hands shoot up. I think Councillor Carter got there first.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to have a few more details on the biodiversity net gain. I think there was some reference to biodiversity units being purchased, or is that all the biodiversity net gain being provided on the site? Yeah, and also sort of not exactly, but slightly linked to that is the planting. Are there any conditions on the actual planting for the to improve the screening of the site from the surrounding area?
The first condition would be that there is approved plans which approves the details of the landscaping scheme, and so the thickening of the planting, the species that are in the landscaping, that is secured by approval of those plans, and so that sets out the requirements to include the landscaping. In terms of other biodiversity net gain approvals, the scheme itself provides well over the minimum 10%, partly because it is producing additional landscaping and tree planting, and so there's every opportunity for that to be secured. The condition that's the most relevant in terms of biodiversity net gain is number 17, which is for a landscape environmental management plan, and that requires items A to J, ongoing monitoring plan, remedial measures to ensure habitat conditions are met, and so it also requires the management options for achieving those target conditions set by the biodiversity metric, the approved metric. And so a combination of the landscape plan and the condition requiring drawings to be in accordance with, along with condition 21, which I know is a duplicate condition actually. The condition trees and hedgerows retained, that relation to existing trees and hedgerows being retained. So there are a number of conditions that go about securing biodiversity net gain landscaping and ensuring compliance with the plans.
And Councillor Connolly.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a bit of a concern around the potential noise from the facility, and the two conditions relating to it don't quite follow what the noise assessment says. And also I'm nervous that they will give the applicant the opportunity to not apply acoustic barriers to the facility. The assessment itself, it does consider low frequency noise, and we know that's much harder to manage. And although there are some acoustic barriers in the plans, the applicant has described those in the documents, and they don't come anywhere near those recommended in the assessment. I think I'm concerned that the condition doesn't just take the advice of the current assessment and put the specification for the sound barriers in now, which are specific to low frequency noise, rather than waiting. I don't know what we're waiting for, if it's still got to be before the system is up and running and you can take measurements then. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not quite sure what it's saying, but I would rather we had a condition that just said put acoustic barriers in as per the noise assessment, because that's very clear and useful as a specification.
Yeah, I mean, the main consultee on this would be the environmental health officers, and they've looked at the noise impact assessment and have concluded that that the development doesn't result in significant noise levels that are likely to cause harm to residents living in proximity. In this case, the nearest dwellings are around 300 metres away, 350 metres away, Hixham Hall, and East End 500 metres. So the impact of people living in those properties is anticipated to be low adverse impact, and that wouldn't cause undue harm to living conditions. And so the environmental health officers have recommended the condition that we've set out in the report, and that limits the noise that can be generated. And so whilst they could use different technologies that have different noise outputs, they would always be limited to the condition which sets an acceptable noise output from this development. And so there is sufficient controls in accordance with environmental health officer advice to secure this site.
So is that condition 19 and condition 26?
That's what I was going to say. Condition 19 requires details of the acoustic boundary treatments, and they have to be in general accordance with the noise impact assessment. So the applicant would have to submit details of the acoustic fencing to us, which we then consult the environmental health officer on to ensure that it provides the necessary mitigation.
Okay, but they have already submitted a document that says what their acoustic barrier is, and it doesn't
Can you
meet.
speak into the
They
microphone?
have already submitted a document which says what their acoustic barrier is, and it doesn't meet that which is in the noise assessment. So I don't know whether they already think they've done that or whether you'll still follow that through.
Well, I think the scheme that's submitted as part of the application is a drawing, isn't it? It's the one referenced in condition 19. I think this is requiring the full details to meet the noise impact assessment, and so that condition gives the extra layer of control that is required to ensure that the acoustic treatment, acoustic boundary treatments are sufficient to bring the noise levels within those standards.
Councillor Stowe.
I get my fair share, don't I? Thank you. Now, I was just thinking about lovely pictures you showed us of the site in 15 years and how it changes. But to make that work, you need to be very selective about what the trees and bushes are that you're planting, because leaves happen to come off trees in the winter, and that will completely change the appearance in the winter and maybe even expose the site. You know, you want things like yew trees that actually keep green leaves on all the time and give good cover. So can we sort of look at that, the condition, how you going to deal with that?
That's been considered in line with the landscape officer, and so they've considered that the landscape scheme is sufficient to overcome that the mitigation required to screen the site effectively all year round, and obviously that would mean that the species that have been selected is suitable for that purpose. Trying to think, there's a condition that can go a bit further if that's what the committee is asking for. Don't believe.
Yeah, just to point out, we've got 2 condition 21s as well.
Condition 21 is about sort of retention of trees and hedges, whereas I think Councillor Stowe is referring to the planting scheme of new trees and ensuring that the species are appropriate to achieve the mitigation that's required.
Maybe condition 20. Mentions internal layouts and boundary conditions.
That's more about hard landscaping. So I think
Right.
it's a specification for the landscape and the types of species that Councillor Stowe is seeking to get clarification on. I think it's something that we can certainly note, and we refer to the landscape plan to see whether there's anything. Yeah. The species have already been identified, and the landscape officer has agreed to those and recommends that they are acceptable. So there would have to be a very good sort of sound reason to go against the landscape officer advice.
Councillor Devonshire.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It does in condition 17, it mentions species in 17, species and mix, I think it calls, in 17G. There was one other question I had, going back to safety. The only safety in any of the conditions is in, what conditioning was it? I've lost it now. There was one condition about battery safety. I'll find it now.
Yeah, 15, the battery safety
15, yeah.
management
But
plan.
yeah, nowhere in that condition does it mention fire. Nowhere in that condition does it mention fumes giving off when there is a fire from this facility. And I was wondering if we could beef up clause 15, condition 15. Please.
The late rep sheet requires consultation with the Hertfordshire Fire Service, but I think it is possible to look at the wording to require adherence to the NFCC criteria or suitable criteria that's relevant to fire safety. So I do think that's possible. Also, we can look at introducing in the reason for that condition specific concern about fire as well. So the condition can be subject to amendment to make more specific in response to Councillor Devonshire's question.
Councillor Hill.
Hi, some of the, thank you, Chair, the considerations raised were about safety of children and pedestrians interacting with traffic, as I don't think there's any pavement around this area. Has there been any consideration into putting temporary speed limits in place during the construction phase?
Could that be a consideration in the construction traffic management plan around certain areas, or?
Really defer to my colleague from county on that one, but I mean that might be difficult to police. But I mean, Matt, what would you suggest?
We have some speed surveys that have been undertaken by the applicant, and also our own speed surveys that we've looked at various points along the route, the Hertfordshire route. Some sections of the Hertfordshire route are 30 miles an hour. Some sections are national speed limit. The nature of the roads, the look and feel means that in the national speed limit sections, vehicles aren't getting anywhere near the national speed limit. That's just the nature of it. So we're looking at, I'd have to show on a plan, but in some sections we're getting around 33 miles an hour mean speeds. That's within a 30 mile an hour zone. So that's along Gins Road, just south of Stocking Pelham. So we do see evidence of very slight speeds above the posted limit. I think with the warning signage that will go in and the other mitigation measures, then that should help. The difficulty with reducing speed limits is we have a speed management strategy, so it's not out of the question, but the speed management strategy talks about the posted speed limit should match the look and feel of the road. And it needs to go through a traffic regulation order to change it. The police are consulted. There's a group that looks at that. It can be quite a challenge, particularly with temporary speeds. Our network management team have looked at this, our safety team have looked at this, and they haven't raised any concerns with respect to the current speed limits with the data presented to them.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, just on that point, 30 miles an hour seems quite high for a road outside a preschool, which has got children and parents, having to stand in the road. So I think, and then if you have combined with that, you have, articulated lorries who are not aware of the area, then it would make sense to lower the speed limits around the road, around the preschool.
Did you have a similar point, Councillor Devonshire?
Yeah, I've been down this road in the morning, and you get cars coming around the corner because there's quite a tight bend. You come around the corner, and they're flying at you. I'll be amazed if that's 33 miles an hour. I think it's a lot higher speed, and because it's such quite tight turns, they can just appear out of nowhere. So yeah, I think you mentioned warning signs, didn't you? I think warning signs would be a great idea. Tell people there's something going on here. You need to slow down.
Yeah, I'd be interested what highways can do in terms of safety, especially around these schools.
So we've looked at the big picture, everything in the round. And so one of the key parts, so it's all the different parts, kind of looking at them together. The standard of any development is to look at a 5-year accident history. We've gone back to since our records began, which is 45 years. It's very unusual to do that, but I think in this case we wanted to really be very, very thorough and stringent on that. And again, I'm talking about just Hertfordshire roads. The 45-year accident history shows a total of 7 accidents along the entire Hertfordshire route. There's no obvious pattern in that in terms of HGVs. There's one of those was involved a pedestrian many years ago. Purely from the accident record, there isn't an obvious concern with that respect. understand about the preschool. You know, you hear the concerns there. We've had a lot of thought about that, discussions with the applicant about that. There was an original suggestion, so immediately outside the preschool, the carriageway is wider, so there's this bit of a parking bay or a passing area. And originally, the applicant was showing that to be one of their passing bays, and we obviously raised some concerns with that. And, you know, particularly as and when it's parked up, it can't be a passing bay. So there was then talk about putting a traffic regulation order in to stop parking. It just wouldn't work and wasn't practical. So the applicant is putting in another passing bay further west, so that the preschool area won't be affected in that sense. Again, in terms of the delivery hours, for Arctics, 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. All other HGVs 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So the bulk of the preschool movements should be avoided. I do understand that there are some stage arrivals and departures within that. I get that, but yeah, I think around the preschool there could be within the final construction traffic management plan to be submitted by condition. That's a particular focus of, you know, some enhanced signage. A temporary speed limit reduction isn't out the question, but I don't think it's possible to say that that is definitely achievable. It's something that I think through the condition we could ask to be investigated, but I don't think I could not here and now say that that is a definite, because it has to go through, you know, a set process, and it's not guaranteed through the traffic regulation order process, which sits outside of the planning process. But we could ask that to be looked into if officers felt that that's an option. And also communication as well. Again, within the final construction management plan, there could be a requirement for the applicant to you know, be in regular communication with the preschool. So when are they starting, the different phases, and then, you know, the preschool communicates that with the parents and guardians.
Yeah, we've used this similar adjustment to other conditions in recent committees. I think this committee has requested similar conditions where developments took place near to a school, and so making sure that construction activities and also drop-off activities in those developments for recognising the proximity of sensitive uses in the area, particularly the schools. So I think we can expand upon the definition and the bullets in the condition to ensure that regular communication with the preschool is a requirement of the management plan. There is a condition requiring that notification of construction times as well, and so the school will be notified of the construction period anyway. So, but I think this is going to take it one step further and make sure that there's dialogue between the applicant and the school, preschool.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, so I just wanted to check on the other issue, the other question, which was the point which was mentioned, which was about possibly having these temporary speed limits. Do we have to? Is that? Have you taken that on board as well, or do we need to propose that could be considered in the plan?
I think the Highways Officer has advised the committee of the challenges that changes speed limits involve, and so I think we can require the construction management plan to include a scheme for reviewing speed limits to determine whether there are amendments to the speed limits that need to be included. And so I think the condition can be set out to require that detail. But I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the condition itself can't require the speed limit to be changed. It's going to be considered as part of the assessment, risk assessment at the time, through the auditing and so on, safety teams. And if one is required, it will be proposed at that stage. So we can refer to it as a criteria, but I'm not sure we can do anything else that can be proposed.
Councillor Stowe.
Just going back to the fire risk, It was my understanding that these transformers, if you like, are surrounded by a water body to keep the temperatures down. And the only risk of fire is when it reaches above a certain temperature, which is could be a shutdown process. I believe it works that way. Can you confirm if I'm right?
I believe that's correct. So there would be an automatic sort of shutting down of the facility in the event that temperatures, subject to the monitoring, would be overheated. So, yeah.
Are we drawing to a close on the debate at this stage? Well, I'm going to propose we approve this application with the conditions. And did we have some of the things been informatives at this stage, or
The recommended changes to the construction management condition.
condition 15 I've got noted, pointed out to me. The battery safety management plan, did we have a?
We've got condition 5, which is construction traffic management. Condition 15 is the widening of the condition for the building management plan to consider fire safety requirements and relevant guidance, and amending the reason for that condition to ensure that fire safety is one of the main reasons for that. Sort of two conditions, 5 and 15.
Okay, so I propose that. Councillor Stowe.
There was the condition also regarding the public access over the road one.
That will be in condition 5 as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. That has been subject to the landscape officer advice, and the landscape officer's advice that the species as proposed in the landscape scheme are already acceptable.
Rachel Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just to assist on that last point, I think condition, obviously there's a general condition to comply with the approved plans and drawings and details submitted with the application. So that would cover off landscaping. But in addition, I think the landscape environmental management plan, which the emphasis is on the biodiversity, does require details to be of the biodiversity, the sort of identified species, etc., on the site, and presumably that includes the perimeter of the site to be kind of monitored, remediation and mitigation that would go along with approval of those details under condition 17.
I think the condition is a biodiversity requirement to the policy that's on condition 17. The reason for the condition is a biodiversity reason. But am I correct, Councillor Stowe, that the concern that I believe you're alluding to is more of a visual landscape concern, impact, rather than biodiversity? That's why I think we're not sure that there is the scope in condition 17 to stretch into that.
But if the landscape plan is one of your approved documents, then and it's covered up there, then it's covered, isn't it, in terms of they have to comply with the general condition of building out in accordance with the approved plans and details.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have then a specific reference to landscaping for screening. This I'm looking at 17G, which is details of species, etc., which is to do with habitat conditions, but we don't have a specific mention of planting for screening.
It's set out in the approved plans condition. So the condition is quite a general worded condition. It just says it in accordance with the approved plans. But the landscaping scheme is the boundaries, the screening is included within those approved plans.
Does that answer your point, Councillor Stowe?
More or less. I hope they've got the sense to use some trees and bushes like hollies and yews and things like that that would actually keep the site, protected from being visual.
Do I have I'm still proposing that with the condition amendments, that we approve planning permission. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dunlop. Now I'm going to take us to a vote. So votes for, please.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And it's granted unanimously. Thank you. Now, moving on to urgent business, and I have none here. So members, that concludes the agenda. I declare the meeting closed at 8:45.
Usual thing, please. Everybody sign the end. Thank you.